Hey guys, Leo Gonzalez here. Today I want to answer the question, where are home prices going? It's the most common question I've been getting asked from realtors, loan officers, clients, homeowners, potential home buyers, you name it. So in this video, I want to break it down for you and let you know where I think home prices are going to eventually end up going. Before we get there, I want to show you what we have up here, okay? What we have up here is two different pyramids. One side is home buyer demand, and one side is home prices. And I want to explain to you what each one of these mean and what's at that foundation of every single one of these, so you can have a better understanding of why we're in the situation we're in when it comes to home prices and home buyer demand. So a lot of people confuse these two things. They're not the same thing. They're correlated with each other, but they're completely separate issues. So we're seeing a lot of headlines right now where we're seeing, a lot of fear in the market, home buyer demand at an all-time low, home prices are going to drop another 20-30%, and all these things going on in the market. And I don't necessarily agree with all the fear that is being portrayed because the facts aren't given. Now, nothing wrong with fear and nothing wrong if fear is a reality of what we're dealing with, but when it's unbased on facts and what is actually happening in the market, I see a problem with it, and that's why I want to make this video. So bear with me over the next 10 minutes while I break this down for you so you can have a better understanding of what's happening in the market right now. So back to those articles. A lot of those are true. Home buyer demand is the lowest it's been in the last 10 years, and specifically for this market in Moreno Valley. So what determines home buyer demand? Well, it's very simple. There's one thing that determines home buyer demand, and that is, can I afford it or not, right? So if you can afford it, the more affordable, the more attractive it is, the better demand we'll have for those properties. Now, it's very simple. In the last couple of years, we had extremely scarce listings. Nobody was putting their houses up on the market, and we had extremely low interest rates. That is a perfect environment to squeeze a buyer to bid up these homes, and that's what we were dealing with. Easy money policy, low interest rates, scarce inventory. It's going to drive demand through the roof. So what's happened since then? Well, home prices and interest rates is what affects affordability, right? Home prices, if it's attractive, you buy. If it's not as attractive, maybe might not be as apt to buy. But we can't control interest rates. We can control home prices, and we'll get to that in a second. We cannot control interest rates, which is the number one part of the factor that's affecting affordability. Who controls the interest rates? Well, that's very simple. There's one entity that has the power to control interest rates, and that is the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve is not a federal entity. They're not government related. The Federal Reserve has the ability to print money, and they have the authority to set monetary policy, okay? So the Federal Reserve can decide if the interest rates can go up or can go down. They can decide to print or to not print more money. What determines the decisions that the Federal Reserve makes? Well, that's the overall economy. That's the CPI index, which is a fancy word for inflation, how much things are going up in cost. Bond markets, GDP, unemployment, wars, and stocks. Now, I can make a video on each and every one of these and how these by themselves can affect what the Federal Reserve does as far as increasing or decreasing the interest rates, but I'm not going to get into that. I do want to point out that the reason the Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates over the last 6-7 months is that inflation has been getting more and more out of control. Now, what do you expect when you're going to print out trillions and trillions of dollars and hand them out, basically like candy on Halloween for everyone? So, of course, you're going to deal with the high inflation, but you're going to also have to deal with the consequences of that high inflation, which is now the affordability factor of gas at the pump, food at the grocery stores, so on and so forth. So now, as a catalyst, we got to deal with higher affordability with homes, and we have to figure out a way where we can kill off that demand. So the Federal Reserve decided that it was a good idea to raise interest rates to try to slow down the demand, and what they did is they end up absolutely killing it. There is no demand. Nobody wants to buy a house right now at these prices, because so far the market, the home buyer, you have determined that I am not going to pay that much for this house, right? So interest rates affect everyone that borrows money. Home buyers, home sellers, banks, and yes, even our own government. Remember, the Federal Reserve is not federal. They're not government regulated. They are a private bank, okay? You can go do your own research on that. So the government does not control this. The government borrows from the Federal Reserve, and then the government has to pay that money back to them via interest. If the Federal Reserve decides to raise interest rates, the federal government has to pay a higher amount for that debt. We'll come back to that in a second, okay? So on the other side, we have home prices. Now, home prices, there's one thing that determines home prices and one thing only, and that is it, and that is comparable sales. But Leo, you know, and the interest rates and this and that, and I get all that. Remember, that's on this side. You don't want to start mixing the two. But comparable sales is the number one thing that affects home prices. If your neighbor has the same exact house as you, same square footage, same lot size, same bedrooms, bathrooms, all of that, well, I think they call those model matches nowadays, but if your neighbor sells that home for higher or lower than the previous neighbor sold their home for, that is your new comparable sale. So that is what determines home prices go up or down, comparable sales. And I'll give you an example here in a second of that. Now, what determines how much that home sells? Well, that's the affordability factor, which is here, and also the inventory. Now, we can't control affordability, of course, because that sits over here with interest rates, which we do not control. However, we can control inventory. And I don't mean that we as one person can control inventory like the Federal Reserve controls interest rates. I mean that homeowners can decide if it is a good time to sell their home or not. Back to that in a moment. So homeowners control the inventory. You decide. Now, what would need to happen in order for home prices to go up or down? Well, that's very easy. Homes either need to be put on the market or homes need to not go on the market. It's very simple. It's black and white. So the less homes you have on the market, the higher demand you're probably going to have. The more homes that go on the market, well, it's going to give buyers choices, right? So a lot of people are actually trying to compare and contrast what's happening now to what happened in 2008. Completely separate animals, guys, okay? Because in 2008, we had distressed sales. We had a lot of distressed sales. There was a lot of banks trying to get rid of their distressed sales, and that flooded the market with foreclosures, short sales, or bankruptcy sales. So much so that 3 out of every 4 homes that sold were in distress, right? So when this happens, you do have a flood of homes hitting the market. You do have almost like the opposite of a bidding war. You have like people wanting to get rid of their houses, so they're just going to lower and lower and lower and lower their price, and that creates home prices falling off a cliff. That's what happened in 2008. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I actually think that's kind of unlikely to happen, but I will give you a scenario here in a second where this potentially might happen. If this happens, then yeah, you're going to have home prices start falling off the cliff. But the more likely scenario, what I believe is going to happen is this. You have more homes sold on the market that are not in distress, and you have, you know, every other home right here, this one right here with the little red roof. So maybe 1 out of 10 might be in a distress situation, or they're in a position to where they need to sell. Because the other 9 homes right here are, and I'm just using that as a number reference. I see that there's actually 4. I'm just giving you an example because of the red roof. So out of these homes, you're going to have 1 maybe, or half a home that is going to be in a position where they're distressed and they need to sell. But the rest of these are just kind of, hey, you know, maybe we'll negotiate a little bit. Maybe we'll give you some closing costs. Maybe I'll reduce it $5,000 for some credit. Or maybe I really need to sell because I'm moving out of state, so we'll reduce it by $15,000. But overall, home prices are just kind of fluctuating right there. And this is where we're at right now. We don't see a lot of distress in the market, and I don't know if we're going to see it, to be quite honest, but it could happen. one of those reasons I believe is SB 1079. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link on it down below so you can check it out. But SB 1079 makes this very difficult for it to happen. This, I believe, is a more likely scenario where you're going to see a little bit more of a fluctuation in home prices. You're going to see homeowners willing to negotiate a little bit more. But if you're a homeowner who says, hey, I can sell my house for, $550,000, but if it sells great, if it doesn't sell great, because I'm not going to go into, 6, 7, 8% mortgages when I have a 3, 2.5 locked in right here. And that's what we had. Is we got a lot of people refinance homes over the last 4 years that got in at really good rates, and the ones that didn't get those extra low rates bought 4 years prior to that bought in at a really, really good price. So the affordability factor of homeowners over the last 8 years has been extremely, extremely well, and I just don't see myself though having those people put their home on the market unless it's absolutely necessary to do so. And we are getting a lot of people that say, I want to sell my house because the money's good, but where am I going to go? Where am I going to get another $1,700 payment when rents are $2,500 for my same house? Where am I going to go buy a house if there's no inventory? So a lot of people are choosing to not put their houses on the market because they just can't find that affordability anymore. So now you're probably thinking, well, where is the correlation between these two and what's going to happen? Basically, what's happening right now is a big game of chicken, right, between the Federal Reserve and homeowners. Because as they raise interest rates, it drives the affordability so high that they can no longer afford it, which puts people over here on this side of it not wanting to put their house on the market, right? So which one is going to give? My prediction is that this side is going to cave in before this side does. That's just my prediction, right? Because things would have to get really bad to get to this situation right here. I mean, we would almost have to go to depression if this were to happen again. And I pray and hope that that doesn't happen. But being that demand has fallen off a cliff, there's very little to no demand for home prices nowadays, or for the homes that are on the market, that people are just removing them. That tells me this side is really strong, right? Now this side, on the other hand, is not as strong. I urge you guys to see what's going on in the bond markets. Our GDP is not as strong. Unemployment is somewhat staying stable, but with the talks of wars and giving all this money to Ukraine and printing trillions of dollars to send it to Ukraine, to the stock market almost being back in March of 2020 COVID levels, and inflation being almost as hot as the 1970s, I think that something's going to give on this side first before this one gives in. But here's a caveat. If this side gives in and they start reducing rates, it's going to drive home buyer demand up again, which is going to start driving home prices up again, right? But Leo, I haven't bought a house, and my son, we just turned, 25, graduated from college, or my daughter who just got married, or, how are they going to be able to afford higher home prices? Now, my prediction is that we're probably going to move into more of a European or Japanese example where they have dealt with this stuff before, where they have dealt with higher inflation, and areas like, the UK and Japan, France, they have 40, 45, 50-year, even Japan, they have 100-year mortgages. So what happens when affordability and inflation get out of control? Well, they just do what they've always done. We've already seen it in the car industry, where you went from a 4-year car note to a 5-year car note to a 6-year car note. Now I've heard there's even as high as 10. I don't know. I've never seen it myself, but that's what I hear people telling me. So I think what's going to happen historically has already happened in other countries, and they're just going to make the debt easier for us to carry. That's my prediction. And if that happens, then home prices are going to go through the roof, much higher than what they are now, to keep the affordability and the demand pretty stable. That's my prediction, guys. But who knows what's going to happen? I don't have a crystal ball. That's just what I think. You don't have to listen to me, but I've been around a while, and I think that that's kind of where it's headed. But if anything changes, I'll let you guys know. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any comments, let me know as well. And if you guys want to reach out to me and you have my phone number, great. If not, you can visit leoandleanna.com if you guys want to reach out to us, get information on this. So thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you share it with a friend or a loved one. Get this information out there, as I believe it's very important. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.